We're here at the Future of Information and Communication conference talking to the authors of some of the most highly reviewed papers. And in this episode, I'm talking to Matthew Reyes, who wrote a paper called The Marketing Game, a model for social media mining and, mind you, manipulation. So the reason why you're watching this YouTube video is maybe because of your model got implemented, Matthew.
Possibly.
Is that possible? Could you take our viewers along? What have you been working on?
So my background is in what they call graphical models. So probability models for interconnected things.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem of decision making on a social network, in particular influencing decision making on a social network, is a big problem. So I decided to use the technical tools that I need to try to solve this social problem or address it.
And I think when you say a big problem, you might be thinking about a problem from a different perspective than our viewers might be. Because when I read this, first thing that comes to mind is Cambridge Analytica and all the nasty stuff that we would call a problem as society. Well, you probably see a scientific problem in front of you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but where is that in this place? When I read social media manipulation, especially the word manipulation, feels like you're making me do stuff that I don't want.
That's a good point. So as far as like the problem, social problem versus technical problem, one application would be to help companies market stuff.
Yeah.
And so the issue of, are you trying to manipulate people to do stuff they don't want to do? I mean, we get bombarded with commercials all the time.
Yeah.
So that's one application. Another would be to try to use this model to detect when other people are trying to influence us. For example, an adversarial government.
Exactly.
But I also just think it's interesting from an intellectual perspective.
Yes. So let's dive into your work a bit. How would you explain the essence of the model?
So the essence of the model is understanding how people influence each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, let's say I want to influence you, but I can't influence you directly.
Okay.
You don't trust me or your guard's up.
Yeah.
But maybe I can influence somebody else who's able to influence you.
Yeah.
So it's understanding the social influence of a group of people,
Yeah.
and using that social influence to influence who you want to influence, I guess.
Yes. And so that's the theoretical model. How do you apply this in practice? Where does this model live?
Right. So far it just lives in papers,
Yeah.
papers that I've written,
Yeah.
some prototype code. Yeah, I mean, that's the big question. I've started looking at Twitter data. So
Mm-hmm.
Twitter has a nice structure.
And it's all very open.
Exactly.
Right? Easy
Yeah.
to analyze.
Yeah, that's a big factor. So starting with Twitter data, you can look at a tweet, a text or an image, try to infer the topic, try to infer their attitude about that, and then, using these types of machine learning algorithms, infer where people's emotional states are, which way do they lean on a certain topic. That's kind of like the next step.
Yeah.
But it's a big problem, yeah.
But now I'm just guessing here a bit, but if I think about practical applications, is this how the next or the current Facebooks and Googles should, can they use the model to improve their advertising algorithms?
Possibly. I mean,
where do you see this going?
Where do I see
If
it?
you can dream, where can you apply this?
So I definitely have an interest in it being applied in intelligence
Mm-hmm.
applications, military. I also think there's just making people aware of all the influences that are bombarding them.
Yeah.
I think is good.
Yeah.
But I'm also interested in helping companies.
Exactly. So let's explore these three a bit. Military intelligence. How would they make use of this model?
So if you have a model for, how to influence people on a network, then you could also use that model to detect when that's happening.
When that's happening. Yeah.
You could also detect vulnerabilities in the network. I think it's just additional information to leverage.
This is an interesting comment. Vulnerabilities in a social network. What does that look like? Could you see, like, oh, wait a second, there's a sector or a group of people who's very easily influenceable? Is that what it would detect, or what's...
Something like that, yeah. I mean, for example, a lot has been made about, fake news
Yeah, exactly.
and, you know, stuff that went on in the last presidential election.
Yeah.
Not everyone is going to receive a piece of fake news and believe it.
Exactly.
So the types of people who are apt to believe fake information, I would say, is a vulnerability.
Yeah. And the
But-
model could help to identify them.
Possibly. But what I had in mind was more, yeah, if you're sort of like you know, if you're overly influenced by certain people, that might be a vulnerability. If you have social connections that are sort of all over the place, that might be a vulnerability.
Okay.
I don't exactly.
No, actually, you don't know yet. Yeah, interesting. Now, the core of your work is building a model. Model is a simplified representation of reality, and one of the key challenges there is validation. What did you do, or how did you validate your model?
So that's coming up.
That's
Yeah.
coming up. That's the next paper you said.
Exactly.
All right.
So the thing about, I mean, there are certain classes of models, what they call exponential families, which are fairly general, and they're fairly data-driven, meaning you collect data, you fit your parameters. Now you might have to do some experimentation to find a parameterization that works. And that remains to be seen, what's the right parameterization.
All right, that's the next step.
But still the general model, I'm fairly confident.
Yeah, and any ideas of where you want to test this in reality, where we're going to see experiments with your model?
Right. First step would be Twitter. Has a nice structure. I actually would like to implement a bot. That's not difficult to do.
Exactly.
So I would like to try to see if I can manipulate
See
someone.
if the model works and if you can influence a few people.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Look at how they're making decisions before I intervene
Yeah.
and then afterwards.
Wow,
Of course, try to be
interesting.
scientific about it.
Yeah. Primarily scientific. Well, you're nearing the edges of ethics right here, right? You're aware of that. I see
Yeah,
that you're
right.
aware of that. Now, Matthew, last question. I'm very curious. You told me this is the second SAI conference you're attending already.
Yeah.
Could you explain to our audience who's never been here what made you submit your paper to this conference?
It just seemed like it had a very sort of broad, high-level focus. It wasn't just looking at, you know, a bunch of papers on one topic, small variations. These are very sort of big-picture problems.
Yeah. And how is that beneficial to you?
Just by being around other people like that, listening to their talks, getting good feedback. So it's a nice conference, set
Nice.
of conferences.
Well, thank you for sharing, and good luck with your future work and
Thank you.
validating and testing the model. And thank you for watching this video all the way till the end. If you're curious to learn more about the other innovations presented here at the FICC, make sure you check out the SAI conference website. And of course, you're going to hit subscribe right here on the YouTube channel. Is there a way how we can influence them to, or manipulate them to do that? Well, I hope this is enough, because then you'll be the first to know when a new video is being published. And I guess we are looking forward to see you at one of our future conferences.